Welcome to the HawkCast with your host, AJ Hawk.
All right, we're live now, but not really live. John Schneider, GM of the Seattle Seahawks, who I spent some time with in Green Bay, I think 4 or 5 years with you. John, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's my very first podcast.
Do you know what a podcast is?
I do know what a podcast is. Thanks. I listen to them. I listen to a lot of them, like the self-help ones, man. I need as much help as I can get. So I listen to them like while I'm driving, scouting, writing reports, typing, that sort of thing.
I thought you would be the type of guy that does listen, like self-help stuff. Haven't you brought in like Ryan Holiday, the author, to Seattle, or passed his books around?
Yeah, absolutely. Obstacles the Way and Ego's the Enemy, two of my favorite books.
How did you become aware of him? I've had him on here before, and that dude is young.
Really?
He's intelligent for sure.
Yeah, he's awesome. I was at a workout. I was at Mariota's workout, actually. I was talking to this guy and who's also a pretty voracious reader. And I say voracious reader, but I'm like a pretty slow reader, so it takes me a while. But he's like, you got to read these two books, man. They're phenomenal. So, actually, it was The Obstacle the Way at the time. That was the first one I read. And then, Pete's got a lot of people that reach out to us. And so in some form or fashion, I was able to get a hold of him and just talk to him about, get a little bit deeper on who he was. And then Ego came out and he sent me like an early copy. And it just really hit home because that's kind of like Pete and I, like that's our, that's just kind of our motto, like you can't make great decisions unless, you take ego out of it.
Have you, are you aware of, I think Pat Riley coined the term, the disease of me?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think it's the biggest thing that we, anybody in any sport or any business, any success you have, you always have to take that step back and kind of assess how you got there and not listen to the outside noise, whether it's talking about how good you are or how bad you are. Like, nothing's ever too great. Nothing's ever too bad. The truth lies somewhere in the middle.
How do you guys,
when you look at, what we went through here, the way we won our first Super Bowl and the way we lost our second Super Bowl, we really had a wide variety of emotions going both ways in that regard.
Is that something you guys talk about daily, like how to manage expectations and manage like egos? Because Seattle's definitely a team that I know you've even said you guys are very open with your players. You have like direct communication back and forth, and that's not always the case when it comes to most NFL teams. Actually, a lot of times I feel like the GM is kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, if you're not scared, but just don't want to get too close to the players because eventually you're going to trade or cut those guys.
Yeah.
How do you? Where do you lie in that?
Yeah, that can go, AJ. That can go both ways. I think when I was around you and before I was able to become a general manager, I always wanted to help guys out and know where they stood. Because you can kind of get lost, especially in a football field. There's so many people. Ultimate team sport. Started with me as a Division III player as a freshman. I always wondered, I just wanted to know where I stood. Like, how come they're not giving me the ball? Or, maybe it's because I'm shorter and slower than everybody else, right? But it's always just become like kind of a constant, trying to have that impeccable communication about letting people know exactly where they stand. And then Pete, when Pete and I got together, Pete is very much about the individual and helping the person become the best individual that he could possibly be before you can go out there and feel free to play ball at your maximum level.
Yeah. So is that something that do you make like a concerted effort to either I don't know, like individual players, like how do you know if you say you're you're listening to the back channels of whatever it may be, if you're going to let a guy like a vet go or you're listening to trade rumors, whatever it is, like how do you, like when do you know when to let the player in on that?
That's a great question. I mean, sometimes it happens where you just know you're going to be affecting somebody's livelihood, and that if that happens, you just want to be able to present it in the most ethical, straightforward manner instead of having somebody feel like they were wronged. And that's something we work on all the time. It's not something that you're out in front of. You can't be out in front of it all the time because you're talking to so many teams daily about so many different players and what's happening in the landscape of the National Football League. And so you're not going to go talking to players every day about what your conversation was about the Green Bay Packers, about AJ Hawk and what your thoughts are on him.
So if that's always a weird dynamic. I feel like now, especially with there's media everywhere you look. Basically we all are media. When you have a social media account, you can report on everything. I always wondered how when there's leaks, when people hear about there's leaks coming from teams, like things getting out that may have happened in the locker room. From your experience, where do those leaks usually come from? I'll give you my opinion after you go.
Okay, cool. Really, quite honestly, I think it's changed so much. This will be believe it or not, buddy, this will be my 25th season coming up. Okay. And
how old are you now?
I'm 46.
Jeez,
so
you've been in there since straight out of college. You've gone from running back to right in the league.
Basically, you could. When it was more like just papers and writers, you were able to find out leaks a little bit quicker. The buildings were smaller. Now it's like I almost tune it out now because there's just so much going on. There's just so much information, and it quite honestly it's like you truly don't know who to believe. And I think it really kicked in when we were, I can't name the player, I apologize, just for people's sake, who was a very high profile player that we were trading in Green Bay. And I was reading the front page of a specific paper, and it was all about Afghanistan and the troops and what was going on over there. And, it said that sick to my stomach feeling about, well, what can I do to make a difference? And I can't leave my two little boys and go fight right now. I can't, how am I supposed to help? And then I got to the sports page, and I was the one negotiating the deal. And I was like, well, this whole article is complete, bullshit. So what am I supposed to believe about what's on the front page? So I've kind of learned to just kind of tune things out and drown out the noise and, just keep going with my moral compass. And I think Pete's very much the same way.
So are a lot of decisions you make, it seems like you're like we can tell just from the short time you've been on here, and I've known you for a while, like being a decent person and letting people know where they stand. Like, are your decisions based strictly on business? Are they like your moral compass, how it's going to affect the guy's family? Like, how do you bring that all into making decisions?
Yeah, my number one job is really, quite honestly, protecting the organization and ownership, and that's why I'm hired. But I think there's a really strong commitment that needs to go into doing the right thing based on the decisions that are made, because at some point everybody knows, this better than anybody. It's a very, very small league, whether it's with the players, the coaches, agents, and executives, coaches on other clubs. And so if you're treating people appropriately, at a specific time, I think that, if you're building a real cool culture of honesty, integrity, having fun, competing your ass off, people are going to want to play for that team.
The culture there.
My point is that, we feel like, the word will get out that, if you go there, hopefully 98% of the time you're going to be treated right.
And it's a fun, I know the culture, especially with Pete Carroll, is like the fun, competitive atmosphere. And I spent some time in Atlanta this past season, and Dan Quinn came from there.
Right.
And I'm assuming a lot of the culture there comes from the Seattle culture, from where I've talking to different players. And it's highly competitive. But Dan Quinn always said, hey, who said we can't have fun and work hard at the same time? And I think players really react to that. Is that something that Pete's kind of had throughout his coaching tenure?
Yeah, I think he would tell you, once he was at, he had a reset. He was with the Jets, and then he was with the Patriots, and then had the year off and went, spent a bunch of time with Coach Wooden in L.A. and really kind of took a step back and had a real cool awakening about who he was at his core, and that he was a competitor and that he's a fun guy. And that's really basically what they did at SC. I mean, they had like Will Ferrell at practice. They had, music pumping. They were one of the, now you go, AJ, you go to every college, you go to visit, they all got music playing in practice, and Pete was really the first one to do that. And so I think he was just like, I'm not gonna change who I am. These guys are still young men, and we're gonna have a blast doing it. We're gonna work our tails off, and we're gonna have fun.
What's the culture like in Seattle compared to what the culture was like when you were in Green Bay? Like, what are the differences, and what's the same?
Good question. I think, Green Bay. The one thing about the culture in Green Bay is that there's so much tradition to rely on. So I remember when we were recruiting Charles, we were like Charles Woodson. We were like, hey, do you want to come back do you want your name to go down with Reggie White and Paul Hornung and just all of the Vince Lombardi, you name it, all the tradition that's always around you all the time, like it would be at Ohio State, right? It's all over the walls. You're just in, it's there. And here it's more, it's a much younger organization. The city, the fans are just as intense. You've played here. It's super loud. It's very similar in terms of the culture and the building, the people that have been there, working there, whether it's, in management or in the equipment room or in video, all throughout the building, it's very similar. And that's why, one of the reasons that Tracy and I were so intrigued about, moving our family back out here, because I had been here in 2000, excuse me, with Coach Holmgren. And it was a real cool family environment, much like what you experienced.
What was it like though? So you came into Seattle, what, 2010?
10, yeah.
So 2010.
Right after I interviewed right after 2 days after we lost that game where Mike Adams ducked under in overtime and knocked the ball out of Aaron's hands. Yeah,
man. So when you interviewed, who's all in the room for the interview process? I wonder, who do you report to now that you're there?
Yeah.
Who was there?
Yeah, it was weird because when we left that day, we were getting ready to leave I can't remember if we played on Saturday or Sunday, but I knew that I was going to go, with you guys. We were all going to Arizona. I had to have my, book to give out, right, to everybody to sit in front of. And I had my, the general manager was going to hire the head coach. So I had 30 pages in my book about, specific head coaching candidates and why, and, my philosophies and all that, and organizationally. And then on Friday, before we got on the plane, they announced that Pete was gonna be the general manager or the head coach, and then he was gonna be involved in searching in the general manager search. So I'm over there just ripping pages out of my book, But I talked to the people that they were basically the headhunters for the position. They were like, "No, he's really excited. He wants to just be involved in the process. He wants to have say in." At 53, what the team's going to look like. Because when he was with the Jets and the Patriots, he didn't have that. It was kind of it sounded like, he may have been involved with people that were a little bit more like, hey, here's AJ Hawk, here are his strengths, here are his weaknesses, and here's the player. Now you go coach him up, right?
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to be like, accentuate the positives of the guy. And if you remember, we were the youngest team in the league for probably like 4 or 5 years in a row at that time in Green Bay. So Todd Leiweke was the president of the club at the time, and Lance Lopes had worked with him before. And those two guys were really the guys that hooked us up. They interviewed like 5 or 6 people, and Pete and I just hit it off.
Did you have?
And then I flew back to Green Bay, and then they brought me back to meet, Mr. Allen, and so we sat down and interviewed with him.
So what is an interview like for a GM? Are you you're like you say, you're presenting this book? Is that a book you've been building for years?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about what your philosophy on acquisition, like trades, waiver claims, practice squad, player development, your draft process, unrestricted free agency, maybe ranking your importance of your foundation of a team and what it looks like, kind of people you're looking for, what kind of people do you want to work with, how are you going to build your team, what's the culture of the building going to look like from a football operations standpoint.
Wow. So then that's kind of unique to have the head coach hired before the GM, correct?
Correct.
So it really
But it worked out great.
I remember when you got the gig, I was sad to see you go, but I was happy for you becoming a general manager. We knew you would be there eventually. And then I started thinking more. I'm like, well, they already had the head coach, and it's Pete Carroll. I was like, I can see Pete and Schneider really vibing well together. That had to be – was that like the biggest thing, like how the new GM would get along with the head coach who was already there? Yeah,
absolutely. And the coolest thing about Pete is he has a really unique ability to instill confidence in people. And when we sat there that day, he's like, look, like, I don't know where you are with your ego and who gets credit for what. He's like, I just want to compete in everything we do. I want to do it better than anybody else has ever done it. And I want you and I to have like the best head coach, general manager relationship. He called it a marriage, that the National Football League has ever seen. And he's like, if you're committed to it, I'm committed to doing whatever I can to get us to that point. And we literally spent like the next 4 months, together, like every single day. His wife Glenna was not here yet. Tracy and the boys weren't here yet, and we were literally just, living here and watching a ton of film together, talking ball, and learning each other, building our staffs, and playing cornhole late at night downstairs in the locker room, and however we could compete.
Wow, that's so like it's pretty rare. I think the relationship you guys have, and it seems to stem from the fact that like neither of you care who gets the credit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I look at it, I'm like, I mean, dude, this is Pete Carroll, right? Like, the guy's won national championships. He's been a head coach. I've watched him do incredible things over the years in my younger years, and I'm like, I want to learn as much as I can from this guy, and I think like philosophically we're totally going to hit it off, and you're not going to work with a guy that is so out there in terms of like that constant quest for knowledge and outside of football, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. We were talking about like with Ryan and all the the SEALs that we have come talk to us, and any political figure, just anything. We're just constantly trying to learn anything we can to just to be that much better than everybody else, and we never ever feel like we have all the answers and it's locked up. Like we don't think like we're not like, okay, AJ Hawk's better than Vernon Davis. Let's just put it away. It's all over, right? Mm-hmm. Vernon Davis was taken right after you. That.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Vernon's a stud, man. What is that? So what about that? How did that first year feel when you came in with a bang and you guys like overhauled that whole roster, like some 280 some transactions you had right when you got like in the door? Did you deal with any like early heat or any anxiety thinking like, I don't know, am I doing the right thing?
Well, yeah, you count that quite honestly, like that that fear of not doing the right thing, or that fear of not competing, or failure just in general is really, what drives me. I'm Catholic, so I tend to be kind of a worrier, so like what's coming next? Like, how do I strategize about like, what do we gotta, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, how do we, who's our third Sam linebacker? Who's our third strong safety? We want our seventh corner being just as good as our sixth corner, and it was a little nerve wracking because we knew we had so far to go. We had such a long way to go, and but I think it was a good way to also let players and staff know that we were going to do what we said we were going to do, and that we were going to try to get better every single day. The hardest part about it, again, was knowing that, we were affecting people's lives.
Yeah. How involved is the owner, Paul Allen? We know he owns the Trailblazers and I think the soccer team there as well, the Sounders. Is he pretty invested in the Seahawks, like mentally?
Yeah, very
his
much.
Time.
Yeah, very, very much. He's obviously an incredible philanthropist and has a ton of different passions, and very much into basketball, very much into football. Incredible mind. He's really smart. He asks really intense questions, and just kind of, keeps them coming at you, keeps the questions coming at you, and is, it's funny. He met with, there was one day he has a brain institute over here, and he came over and was watching practice a little bit later on and meeting with me about the team. And, I was talking through a couple different positions that we were concerned about, and just kind of give him a general overview of the team. And then he was talking to me about these doctors from Norway that, they had met with, and they found all this some incredible thing, that they made progress with. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you were just at the Brain Institute, and now you're spending time with me,
He's big on AI, isn't he? Artificial intelligence. Isn't that what that Brain Institute's doing?
Yeah, he's into so much stuff. It's unbelievable. Elephants, he's got like saving the elephants in Africa, and like building, sustainable cities in Africa. And he's just, helping. We have a fairly big homeless situation here in Seattle, and he's involved in so much stuff. I mean, he's an incredible guy. If you ever get a chance to read his book, it's a pretty awesome book.
Yeah, I definitely want to after hearing more about him, and then seeing like, oh yeah, you're right, he's involved in everything. But what about, has he taken you out on the yacht yet? I know he has a gigantic yacht.
Yeah. No, that's funny. It's funny. My neighbors, hey, you get a kick out of it. My neighbors and their wives and stuff. My buddies and their wives are always like, dude, when are you gonna ask him if we can go hang out in the? I'm like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it leases only for like $400,000 a week or something. It's nothing. I'm sure it doesn't even lease it out. That's great. What about with this whole analytics culture and everything going off? I know Theo Epstein with the Cubs was like given time to. He knew he wanted to build the team through the minor league system and drafts and everything. But they gave him some time to lose some games, and now, bam, the Cubs win, and the whole world changes. Basically, like, where are you at with the whole analytics, sabermetrics situation? I think the Browns, I know Sashi Brown is really into the numbers game. Are you guys, like, deep into that?
I would say we're on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably like about a 7 or an 8 in there. It's really kind of there's really two aspects of it for us. It's about, from a coaching standpoint, like what's coming, how do we help you guys out, about different trends, formations, personnel groupings, that sort of thing. And then, on our end, from an acquisition standpoint, it's really about, for us, like what are the questions, like what brings us back to the film, and to what didn't we see? There's certain things that show up. And I was a running back a couple of years ago that was the number one guy, say, yards after contact, receiving, right, a runner out of the backfield, and I didn't see it, so we had to keep going back to it, like where is it? What is it about him, like, after he catches the ball and gets his head upfield and is able to kind of like either make people miss or get low enough to bounce off tackles and his lateral balance, and what does that look like? And it was pretty cool because I didn't see it, but yet our analytics group was able to show me, like, yeah, no, you gotta check this out. And it's pretty cool because we'll have them. They won't be in like some of our analytics guys. None of them, but they won't be in our meetings. But then I'll just be like, like say 3 weeks before the draft, I'll be like, all right, I'm going to leave you guys in here in this draft room. I'm going to trust, everything in this draft room stays in the draft room, right? Just like Vegas. And I'm like, I want you guys to crush this board. I want you to take it apart. I want you to rip it apart. And then, and just know I have the ultimate respect for you, but that doesn't mean we're going to move guys. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But what it does is it always kind of steers us back to the questions that we need to get answered.
Wow. So these when teams hire analytic guys, like, where are they usually coming from? They don't have sports backgrounds usually, do they?
You should see the resumes, dude. Like, if I applied for a job right now, like, there's no way it would happen, right?
Yeah.
These guys are, MIT and no, it's funny. Actually, a couple years ago, I sat on it's called a sports management. It was a global sports management institute, like conference, and there was a board with one of the panels was Theo Epstein, Daryl Morey, who's like MIT, so Theo's Yale, Daryl's MIT, and then I'm like University of St. Thomas, right? Like, wannabe football player, right? Like, wannabe pro football player, wannabe Walter Payton. Anyway, it was cool. It was actually a fun thing because I learned a lot from those guys, and then just from like the football it's so much about just like, what's in your heart, what kind of work ethic do you have, what kind of drive do you have, like, the instincts, the eyes, the anticipation, now does that show up like in analytics? In my opinion, it doesn't, but there's certain things there's certain questions that are raised that can bring you to a different point when you're watching the film.
So yeah, it's one little piece of the puzzle, I guess, that you collect all this data, and then ultimately the decision comes down to you and Pete Carroll if you're going to draft a guy or try to go sign him, huh?
Yeah, it's one of the tools. I mean, it's like, our psychological tests. It's like an interview that I'll have, like, I love going to the equipment guys, when I go to universities, like, hey, what's this guy like? Like, does he treat the students, well? Does he treat, does he treat the guys that are working for you well? Is he sloppy? Does he leave his stuff all over the locker room? Does he expect things from you? Just how they treat people,
Now, you said earlier, I have to go back to this. You said you met a guy about the Ryan Holiday, his books at Mariota's Pro Day. What are you doing at Mariota's Pro Day when you have Russell Wilson?
There were other people there, man. There's
Well, you just said Mariota's Pro Day, though. Well, I guess it's his.
Sorry,
yeah.
Oregon's Pro Day.
Oregon's,
right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and Mariota was working out, so I wasn't paying close attention, I guess, right?
I gotcha. Yeah.
But no, I was just asking him about their organization, and he said he had just read a cool book, and so anyway, we got into it.
I got you. Yeah, no problem. And that's like franchise quarterbacks now, though. So you've been in the league forever, as you say, going on 25 years. How is it different now handling franchise QBs compared to when you first got in the league? Because quarterbacks are more valuable now than ever before. Like, if you don't have one, you can't win the Super Bowl. Like, if you don't have a stud quarterback, I think those days are long gone to where you can have a game manager and still win it all. Like, what's the difference like now compared to like late 90s when you were dealing with these franchise guys?
Yeah, that's like the question of the day, right? Like, I mean, that's you constantly are looking for like who's next. Like, as great as Russell Wilson is, like we have to have somebody ready for him, preparing for when he doesn't want to play anymore, or like you have to have somebody ready all the time. And and I think, early 90s, I think a lot of teams at that time were keeping 3 quarterbacks. Now we're keeping 2. And I think the problem that happened, the thing that I've noticed, great question, man, but we don't have NFL Europe anymore. Okay. So there are guys that you played against, like the Jake Delomes and Mark Bulger and Brad Johnson and Kurt Warner. And these were all guys that were able to, they would have been like 3rd or 4th string quarterbacks that, I can't remember if Mike McCoy played in there or not, but like, guys that were able to go play and get some reps and have legitimate, game reps against guys that had, legitimate speed like yourself on defense.
Yeah, the NFL. Do you think
NFL?
You
got that right, like speed that you're really. You got that. Right.
There you go. I got you, man.
Not as fast as Vernon Davis, but you're pretty damn fast.
Nobody's as fast as Vernon.
Why am I bringing that guy up again? I apologize.
Because you're upset you drafted me instead of him, I guess, back in 06. Man, Brett could have had a tight end. I didn't think I was too young and naive and stupid at the time to think about it. But I got drafted, and someone asked me, like, man, you think Brett's pretty upset that they didn't take Vernon, like an offensive guy? I was like, I never thought about it till right now. Yeah, I'm sure he probably had some resentment when he saw my name called.
Oh, man.
Wow. Yeah,
but I would say just being able to develop what you would consider like a franchise quarterback, Rich Gannon didn't get his true shot until he was probably like 28, 29 years old, really had to pay his dues. So there's, as you know, they come in all shapes and sizes. They just like our guy, they just have to be, and like Aaron, they got to be football players. They got to be athletes.
Yeah. How does it? But they're taking up such a when you guys won the Super Bowl in Seattle. I believe Russell was still on his rookie contract. So you're like in a prime situation, almost like the Cowboys right now, to where they have Dak Prescott making $600,000 when the way he's playing, he's a $20 million quarterback, and so you have like this window of time when you can sign up all these other guys while your quarterback is still a very low salary for that position.
Yeah.
How did you transition through that period? Because Russell, you obviously paid him the contract that he was due, and then you still found a way to keep a lot of the studs around. Like, how did you work that out with the salary cap and everything?
So we're just, like I said earlier, we're constantly talking about being a consistent championship caliber football team, and when we're talking to publicly, when we're talking to the fans about it, it's about just knowing that my team's got a shot every single year. Now, there's always a caveat with that, right? Like, when I was little, growing up in Green Bay, like those guys were always going to be there. Paul Coughlin was going to play for the Green Bay Packers no matter what, right? And unless he was traded, there wasn't unrestricted free agency. There wasn't a salary cap. So it's kind of trying to educate the fans and the fact that, look, we're going to work our tails off every single day to be a consistent championship caliber football team, but just know that there's going to have to be, tough salary cap decisions that we're going to have to make in terms of guys being cap casualties and releasing players and or trading some players that, 30 years ago would have gone down as, the greatest player in Seahawk history or something.
Well, you were the guy that when you got to Seattle and shortly after you made the trade for Marshawn Lynch, which, I mean, I don't know if it's how much it is talked about, but that's obviously an unbelievable trade. I mean, Marshawn kind of transformed everything when he was in Seattle. He was such a huge part of that. And then you're the guy that ended up, he retires, and then you have to trade him to Oakland.
Yeah.
How'd that play? How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, that was a blast, right? So Reggie McKenzie, who's one of my best friends, right?
Yeah.
Really, Pete helped me out a ton with the Marshawn thing because they were very much like Buffalo was like, no. They said no. They drafted C.J. Spiller. They were like, no. And then, the closer we got to the trade deadline, he's like, hey, have you talked to Buffalo again? And I'm like, bro, I've talked to them like 40 times. They've said no. He's like, just come on, just, humor me, whatever. So I called him again and they were like, hey, well, what were you thinking? And it was actually the week before the deadline. So we just worked something out. We thought he'd bring like a definite physical presence and toughness to our football team. And then, really when you have a guy that's on reserve retired and, we couldn't absorb his cap number, once he reinstated. And so, Reg and I were just able to, work something out, with the Raiders, hometown guy, one of the last years they're going to play there. So, his time was done here. I mean, he was really kind of excited about, going to play for the Raiders and making a comeback for, his hometown club.
Yeah, I think it worked out well for everybody. I mean, he gets back in the league, his hometown team, and yeah, you guys got some value for someone who was retired. So yeah, it worked out for everybody. But where do you stand like with how I host a lot of shows on Sirius XM and the NFL channel, and we talk about different like GMs or what's going on around the league, and you're really, I guess, open compared to what other teams. A lot of guys are holding everything so tight to the vest, and I think you even said it like what do you say? What you've seen in the media lately it's real. Speaking of like when there's all this talk about Richard Sherman and everything. What makes you able to or just to tell the truth? I mean, like you're open. Where did that come from?
I think it's just really, the relationship that we have with our players, and it depends on the player. The fact that I was doing a radio show and I was asked a question, and it had already been kind of like out there on the ticker, people talking about it and everything. And, I'm not a very good liar, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm not inability to lie. You're just a good dude.
Yeah, I'm just not going to tell people I'm not going to tell people like something that's a bunch of BS just because, we're trying to cover for somebody or trying to do something that's real sneaky or something like that. I mean, in my opinion, the best deals to get done are the ones that you're just, you're the most honest about, and this is what we need to get, and this is where we are, and this is what we think of the player, and here we go. And with Richard, we have a great relationship with Richard. I mean, he's always going to be a Seahawk, he'll be up there on that Ring of Honor someday, I'm sure. And it's just part of that impeccable communication I was talking about.
So like if you come out and say that in that radio show because you're the inability to lie, like most GMs would say, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never read anything like that. You just play dumb. Was that something that you'd already had communication with a guy like Richard Sherman before something like that comes out?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's how you feel. You can feel comfortable then if it is somewhat public. Like, hey, I've talked to this guy directly. Sure,
absolutely.
Okay.
And also, if something comes out that with another player or anything like that, I mean, nobody's perfect. That obviously, and especially when you're doing interviews and everything. And if something were to come out that I felt somebody might be sensitive about or something, I'll just shoot him a text and say, hey. I said blah blah blah, and you know what? That I maybe I said it inappropriately, or it wasn't malicious. Didn't mean anything by it. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean?
I got you. Yeah, I only have one or two left. I'm gonna let you roll. I know you're out there working the waiver wire, figuring stuff out here, and this weird. Well, we're going into like the dead time of summer now for you guys, which I'm sure you still stay pretty active.
Yeah, we have a mini camp. We have a mini camp coming up.
Yeah.
So we have like 3 more days, and then we're out. But we're always jamming on something.
Oh, I know. Until Mr. Allen lets you use his yacht, then you can unplug for a week. You guys like that. What I think people respect about Seattle though is the players aren't scared to speak their mind, no matter what it is. Like stand up for a cause they believe in, or you have guys that will like write stuff for the Players Tribune or different websites, and they're very open and honest. I think a lot of players are scared to do that sometimes. Is that just the communication thing where you let them be themselves, but they know that to be the best team, they all have to buy in at the same time?
Yeah, I think you would recognize that at the end of the day, people can these are you're a grown man. You're not gonna Pete and I basically believe top down leadership does not exist anymore. You have to have everybody's full buy-in, and I think our players know that they are respected, and we're going to do whatever we can to help them and coach them up and develop them as men and as football players, and try to help their causes and their families and everything. But I think at the end of the day, everybody knows that we're out there trying to kick people's asses, and that we all have to come together to compete, and we're going to do that at a very high level. And so I think guys can bring things to a certain level, but I think they also know when to rein it in, and use it as somewhat of a chip on their shoulder too, to come together.
Would you ever foresee an instance where you would tell somebody to back off on something like that they were speaking about publicly?
Yeah, I've done that before.
Really? Oh, you have? Okay.
Oh yeah.
You say, hey man, we're
impeccable communication. It's not just like, yeah, dude, go ahead. Why don't you and Will Ferrell run down the street buck naked? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that. No. There's definitely a cutoff, right? Like,
okay.
Yeah.
And you're the one that
the conversations in my office are not like they're not all a blast. You know what I mean, bro?
Yeah. Well, because you're not scared of you can't be scared of there's a fine line between being like a player's coach, player's GM, but they need to know who the boss is at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't have, and really, truly, it comes down to, like I said, looking out for the organization. And when you're looking out for the organization, it really means you're looking out for the individual too. So, I mean, whether the guy's got, anxiety issues, or whether he's got marital issues, or, drug issues or abuse issues, how can we help that person? That's what it's all about. And, what's the underlying issue that's going on, and how do we help that person? Because we're all trying to be the best we could possibly be every single day.
Gotcha, man. Final thing for me, what it just made me think about, have you ever say anything where you wish you could take it back, like right away, instantly?
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, every day.
I mean, like went out to the world, not just like in your office or in the locker room, like that you just.
I'd have to no. I think I do a pretty good job of like keeping it real, keeping it honest, but not letting there be too much.
What about taking shirtless pics with a WWE belt?
Oh God, yeah, bad
decision.
That was bad.
I think it was a great decision. You look pretty good, man. You look like you've been doing incline bench for a while.
I can tell you what happened. Okay,
please.
And you can help me.
Okay.
So we're taking their picture like the day before the Super Bowl, and we had 2 great weeks of practice. And I got over there, and Eric Kennedy, our equipment director, and Dan Quinn were like, "Hey, something's up with the team this morning, man. Like, they are super tight. It doesn't seem like something's going on, And I was like, you know what? Why? I was just asking all these questions, like, well, what's different? What people up earlier this morning, like, what's going on? This is a Saturday before the game, right? So we're all putting those cheesy khaki pant coaching slacks on, right? And Eric's like, hey, we got the WWE belt today, and I'm like, oh, that's badass. And DQ's like, you should bring it in there and just get them fired up. And I'm because I never really do that stuff like around the team, right? I kind of just like walk around the periphery and like give the guys shit individually, Yeah. And so I was like, you know what, you're right. So I had the cheesy golf shirt on and the slacks, and Dan Quinn was actually the one that was like, and this is totally his fault. He's like, well, dude, you got to take your shirt off. And I was like, you know what? Good point. So I took my shirt off and I went in there, and I was doing the WWE, like just hollering at guys and, trying to get guys fired up and stuff. And then, then I took a couple pictures, and then a couple of our guys like put them out right away. And I was so pissed, man. I had to text John Elway and tell him I was just trying to lighten the mood, I was just trying to do the right thing, man.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was after the game and I was had the thing over my shoulder, drinking a couple beers or something. It was the day before.
See, that's what I thought too. I did read that it was before, but I thought it was just post game, hey, anything goes at the Super Bowl locker room. So I was like, that's amazing. I love it.
No, I was just trying to lighten the mood, man. Everybody was so tense,
So do you have a team meeting then, your first day back at off-season workouts? Hey guys, any pictures of me, the general manager, you got to run them through me before you put them out.
I stayed away. They knew I was pissed, man, because then one of the players took his off, whatever the social media was, right away. But then after the game, they I think Earl put it out right away or something. And I was like, Earl, what are you doing, man? I just went through all the stuff yesterday. And he's like, we just won the Super Bowl, man. Lighten up, what's your deal? But yeah, no, that was my mom had to see that, and my wife, right?
She probably loved it, man.
Yeah, because that big belt does wonders for your belly fat,
Oh man, I loved it. I thought it was great to see a GM like that. And hey, you maybe analytics can run that back, and that's probably a big reason why you guys won 43-8. You were so loose because of that Saturday morning, pep talk by you and.
Oh yeah, we were real loose. We had guys fighting 5 minutes after that.
That's good, man. You guys you're on the fine. There's a fine line between being crazy competitive and crossing that line. Every once in a while, you have to take a step over that line, and guys like you are there to reel them back in.
Yeah.
That's why
I hear you.
All right,
man. I appreciate you reaching out, dude. I wish we could have got you out here at some point, man, near the end of your career, but. Hopefully we retired a Packer and be up there in that Wall of Fame and everything, because I think you're a hell of a football player and even better dude.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. Say hello to the family, and hopefully we'll talk down the road.
You do the same. Did you tell everybody that my son had a crush on your wife?
Oh yeah, well my wife misses your family greatly. Trust me.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh yeah,
tell her Jack said what's up.
I will for sure, man. Trust me. It's gonna make her sad. Because she misses Green Bay so much, and you guys were a big part of our time there. So no question, she'll love it, man.
Well, I appreciate you. Have a great summer, brother.
All right, thanks, you too.
All right,
see ya.
We're glad you could join us for today's conversation. After you subscribe to the show, head over to thehawkcast.com or reach out to AJ directly on Twitter at @officialAJHawk to recommend future guests that will help us inspire people to keep talking. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you next time on the HawkCast.